Hey, good morning. Let's talk about reparations. What is it? Well, according to the United Nations, reparations refers to the process and result of remedying the damage or harm caused by an unlawful act. In the case of the Tulsa Race Massacre, the unlawful act is when thousands of angry white people killed over 300 innocent black people, looted their businesses and homes, and burned over 35 city blocks to the ground. All because a black teenager stood in an elevator with a white woman, and on his way out the door either stepped on her foot or bumped into her. So what is the purpose of reparations? The UN says that the purpose of reparation is generally understood to reestablish the situation that existed before the harm occurred. So did the state of Oklahoma or the city of Tulsa do any of that? No, they did not. You see, for decades, they lied about it and deliberately covered it up. A newspaper removed the front page story about it from their archives, and the police and state militia archives about the riot were missing as well. And falsifying police records is a criminal offense. The UN goes on to say that restitution should be made whenever possible to restore the victim to the original situation before the gross violation of international human rights law or serious violations of international humanitarian law occurred. And we all know that the Tulsa Race Massacre, as well as chattel slavery, are violations against human rights laws. So in 2020, survivors and descendants of those who died in the Tulsa Race Massacre went to court and sued the state of Oklahoma and the city of Tulsa for reparations. However, Judge Wall said that no descendants of anyone in the Tulsa Race Massacre can file for reparations, only living victims. So, Brother Ellis, who's now 102, his Sister Randall, who's now 108, and Mother Fletcher, who's now 109, went to court to sue for reparations. But in 2023, Judge Wall said, no, you can't have reparations. So she dismissed the case with prejudice to make sure that they couldn't file again, which was a slap in the face to the survivors of the Tulsa Race Massacre who were simply looking for justice in their lifetime. Even though they didn't receive reparations for the crimes against humanity they endured, the United States has issued reparations before. For example, on January 12, 1865, General Sherman promised black people 40 acres and a mule as reparations for their enslavement. But President Johnson said, no, they don't need 40 acres and a mule. Their freedom is enough. Give the land back to the human traffickers that enslaved them. And that's exactly what they did. The following year, formerly enslaved Africans were given 6 months to purchase land at reasonable rates without competition from white Southerners or Northern investors. But because they worked their entire lives as enslaved people and received no pay, they had no money, and few ex-slaves were able to take advantage of the program. And the largest number that did were located in Florida, just a little over 3,000, and eventually the program failed. In 1862, President Abraham Lincoln signed the Act for the Release of Certain Persons Held to Service or Labor within the District of Columbia, and it gave former slave owners $300 per person that they set free. More than 3,100 enslaved people saw their freedom paid for in this way. However, newly freed black people got no money if they decided to stay in the United States, because the act provided for an immigration incentive of $100. I'm gonna give you $100 to just leave the States. You worked for us your entire life, so here's $100 to get the hell on up out of here. Now, the lowest estimate of what enslaved Africans were worth in the 1860s is around $20.3 trillion in today's money. Now, that's enough to fix the racial wealth gap in this country, and it'll only cost the United States a year of their GDP. But many politicians, policy, and lawmakers have been dead set against reparations since the 1700s. You ever wonder why? Well, according to Reuters, it's because 118 of America's most influential leaders have a slaveholding ancestor. That list includes state senators, state representatives, presidents, Supreme Court justices, and governors, many of whom have been dead set against reparations, because they would have to pay the descendants of people who were forced to make their families wealthy. Take our governor of Louisiana, John Bel Edwards, for example. His ancestor enslaved 57 black people, and they worked their entire lives to make his family wealthy. Our state senator, Bill Cassidy, His ancestors enslaved 4 black people, and they worked their entire lives to make his family wealthy. John Kennedy, our other state senator, his ancestor Nathan Calhoun enslaved 65 black people, and John Kennedy is opposed to reparations. Rick Allen, the representative from Georgia, his ancestor enslaved 133 Africans, and he's opposed to reparations. The governor of Alabama, Kay Ivey, her ancestor enslaved 33 Africans, and here's the prices of what they were worth at the time. Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett's ancestor enslaved 21 Africans. No wonder she's opposed to reparations. Pete Sessions, the representative from Texas, his ancestor enslaved 96 Africans. The representative from Nevada, her ancestors enslaved 183 Africans. In Oklahoma, James Langford's ancestors enslaved 3 Africans. Mark Wayne Mullen's ancestors enslaved 2, while Oklahoma State Representative Frank Lucas, his ancestors enslaved 12 Africans. President Bush's ancestor is responsible for enslaving 25 Africans who worked their entire lives and received no pay in order to make his family wealthy. Bill Clinton's ancestor enslaved 1 African, while President Obama's ancestors enslaved 2 people. And that list goes on and on and on. Throughout American history, we've seen cases where the United States of America gave reparations to various groups of people. Native Americans for stealing their land and Japanese Americans for putting them in concentration camps. Yet when it comes to Black Americans who've experienced over 400 years of enslavement, Jim Crow, racism, legal and illegal discrimination, the concept of repairing all the harm that was done to us is a foreign concept to them, and they don't want anything to do with it. And that's because many people in America still have the mindset that Supreme Court Justice Roger Taney had in 1857 when he ruled that the Negro has no rights that the white man is bound to respect.